1923 in Norfolk, Nebraska. At home, of course, everybody was born at home then. Her parents are Leola and Carl Brinkman. When she was born, she joined her brother Charles, who was 3 years old, and 3 years later, her brother Harold joined the family. Believe it or not, Mom weighed 10.5 pounds at birth. That is, and her brother weighed over 11. She is named after both of her grandmas, which she feels is quite an honor. One of her earliest moments is of her Grandma Brinkman. She loved her Grandma Brinkman. Her mother, not so much. They didn't get along too well, and whenever they were together, my great-grandparents and my grandpa would speak in German. My grandmother didn't understand a word, so she always thought they were talking about her. So she wasn't very fond of her mother-in-law. But anyway, Grandma Brinkman, great-grandma Brinkman, decided that she was going to take my mom's doll home. She was going to make her some pretty clothes and for her little special granddaughter. Well, she looked at the doll. She said, "This doll is really dirty." Mom loved that doll, so of course that doll was dirty. So she made her clothes. My mom sneaked around and found him. She was so excited. And Grandma said, "Vince, this doll is so dirty, maybe I better wash it." So she got a big old pan, put sudsy water in it, and stuck that doll right in there. Well, guess what? That was a composition doll head. When she pulled that doll out of the water, it had no face. And on top of all that, she never did give Mom the doll clothes. She said, "Well, you don't have a doll now, what do you need the doll clothes for?" Well, my grandmother, not liking her mother-in-law a whole lot, ooh, was she mad. How dare she? Didn't she know that doll's face would just come off? Well, as I said, they didn't get along too well. One of her first fond memories when she was young is hitching the horse up to the buggy. Yeah, she rode around in a buggy. And she would ask, "Why are you doing that?" She said, "Well, we're going to go see your grandma." She was always so happy. She loved to go see her grandma. Not her mom, but she did. And then she went on and she started school in eastern Nebraska. That family moved around a lot. Lots of places. My grandfather was not really a sharecropper, but a ranch hand. And she started school in eastern Nebraska, and by 3rd grade they had moved to western Nebraska. You've heard our parents always talk about, our grandparents, boy, walking to school, what a bummer. I walked uphill both ways in the snow. Well, really, my mom did. Not both ways off the hill, but in the snow. And if it got too bad, then she would have to get over next to the fence, and her and her brothers would walk along the fence to find their way to school. I don't know how many miles it was, she never told me, but I'm sure it was over 10. So when she was in this school in western Nebraska, she happened to be the only girl in the class. One room schoolhouse. Finally the teacher went and talked to her mother and said, "You know, sending this little girl to school in these pretty little dresses with snow up to her knees, that's not really a good idea. I would prefer that you dress her in boys' clothes." Well, my grandmother wasn't too happy about that. I mean, this is her little girl. She wanted her pretty little dresses and stuff. And the teacher says, "Well, she is the only girl in the classroom. She was the only girl with all these boys." And so Grandma said, "Well, since she is the only girl and doesn't really have to outdress anybody, okay, I'll dress her like a boy, so she'll be warmer." And this teacher that was there, Mom remembers, she was really good with her because being the only girl, I think the teacher kind of spoiled her just a little bit. When she'd get to school, when it was really snowy and stuff, the teacher always had a pan of hot water, or warm water, for her to take her boots off and stick her feet in. Warm those little tootsies up. That's a pretty good teacher. Well, then again, this teacher asked for my mother's doll. She said, "May I borrow your doll, Amanda?" I'm sure my mom thought, "Really? Do I want her to borrow?" She wouldn't tell her why. She said, "I just want to borrow your doll." She said, "Well, I guess." So she lent her doll, and Mom was kind of nervous after what happened to the last one. And why did the teacher want my doll, you know? Well, this teacher, this is how she loved my mom. Made all kinds of clothes for that little baby doll. And when it came back, guess what? It still had its face on. So she was just elated. Okay. As I said before, my grandparents, my mom and her brothers, they moved a lot. She says she can remember that one of the places they went, these are people's ranches where Grandpa was a helper, and a lot of times Grandma was their cook, took care of their kids. And they had to sleep. Her mom, her dad, her and her brothers had to sleep in a barn. That's the only place they had for them. But Grandpa, he was ingenious, and he did turn a chicken coop into the kitchen. So Grandma didn't have to cook out in the barn. She could have a little kitchen. I don't know what they did in the winter. No? So she lived there. Another place they lived in was a dugout with windows and the roof above the ground. But Mom said she really liked it there. It was warm in the winter and cool in the summer. She said that was a pretty good place to live. The last place she recalls while they were still in Nebraska is a sod house. They weren't too happy with the sod house. It wasn't too big. So the ranch owner told my grandfather, "Well, then you can build you a little place." So he built them a little house, but no sooner than he got it done, they're on the move again. They moved all over. It was the Depression time, and Grandpa's sister, she said, "You know, there's a lot of work in Oregon. Why don't you come on out here and we can put you to work and everything." Grandpa said, "Well, that sounds like a good idea. We'll head to Oregon." So they went on to Oregon and they moved to town. Well, they didn't like it in town. They had lived in the country for so long. They didn't like being all around those crowded people. So Grandpa found a job. Grandpa worked at the railroad, and then he found a place to rent in the country. And for $13 a month, he had 10 acres to farm. Mom said one of the nicest houses that he ever lived in. And 10 cows that he could milk and sell the milk and raise the calves and sell the calves, whatever he wanted to do. So she really loved being out there. And no longer did she have to walk to school. She got to ride the bus 20 miles each way. So she attended that school. That was probably one of the longest schools you stayed in, Mom. Arlington. She went to school in Arlington on the Columbia River. Well, I think Grandpa, he farmed the land, took care of the cows along with his kids and stuff, and I think he got tired of 2 jobs because he worked at the railroad too. So he decided, we're going to move back into town. Well, my mom was not happy about that. She didn't like living in town. And us kids can attest to that because we were always kept out in the country. She thought she had more control over us. Little did she know what we did when she was gone. But we were perfect when she got home, and so was the house. But anyway, so they talked about moving back to Ione and going to live there. Grandpa would work at the railroad, and I don't know what Grandma was going to do. And Mom was angry. She had just broken up with her boyfriend. Oh, this kid she loved. 16, you know. How much you can be in love at 16. And so they broke up. So, well, we're going to move to town. Well, what happens is Mom met this boy named Alvin. And she knew him a whole week and said, you know what? Let's get married. I don't want to move to town. So they did. But, no. Okay, so they moved into town, and you know how young couples think, whoa, we got it made. Well, they found a place to live in the country on a sheep ranch. Of course, they had to work. You can't just live on somebody's land for nothing. So they were given a small trailer, room and board, and they owned, he worked as around the ranch. Mom, at barely 17 years old, because she married when she was 16, that girl. And you tell your kids and grandkids, you better wait. But anyway, they moved to the ranch, and Alvin was a ranch hand, and Mom was the cook. She thought, well, I cook. I like to cook. You know, that's okay. But she didn't know that her job started at 4 o'clock in the morning. She had to get breakfast for everybody. And then, oh good, she got off at 2 o'clock. How fun! 2 to 4 is all. 4 o'clock, she started in again. Did not get finished. By the time she got the dinner done, all the dishes done, everything prepped for the next meal the next day, it was 10 o'clock. Back to sleep, and guess what? Back up at 4 o'clock the next morning. I don't know that they stayed in that place very long, because they hopped around California and Oregon. Well, the war started, and her husband decided to join the Navy. And everybody did. That was what they did. And while he was gone, of course, Mom, he met up with my mom. They were so happy to see him. And him saying, you know what? I'd like to have a divorce. I've fallen in love with someone else. So she said, you know what? Fine. If that's what you want, okay, divorced, no hard feelings, the marriage was over. Then, one day, she was sitting in you'll never guess where she was sitting, a bar. She had stopped by there after work, but she assures me, she didn't drink. There was no drink. She had to stop there because that's where her ride stopped. It was giving her a ride home. Well, my dad walked in. My dad, very handsome. Very, very handsome man. Always was. And she took one look at him and she said to herself, that's the man I'm going to marry. It was love at first sight. But for him, it took a little while. But she wore off on him and they got married. They married and met me in Vancouver, Washington on March 14th, 1946. And Dad, knowing friends in LA, decided they should go there because it was a big city and he had some friends there and knew he could probably get a job. And Mom says, fine, okay, how are we going to get there? He goes, well, how's your thumb? And Mom goes, huh? He says, well, how's your thumb? Mine works pretty good. That's how I got back up here. So they hitchhiked. We're on their way to Los Angeles to start their married life. Well, they got as far as Modesto, and Dad said, you know what? I have a friend that lives here in Modesto. His name is Johnny. Really nice guy. And he says, Let's see if we can find him, and maybe he can lead us to a job to make enough money to finish our trip to LA. Well, they were contemplating that, not really, because Johnny worked out on a ranch somewhere, and they weren't real sure how they were going to find him. And here he come walking up the sidewalk. Now, what luck is that? And so he told them, he said, well, they're hiring at Hume's Cannery in Turlock, and I'm sure you can get on, but why don't you go there and try? So they went down there, and Mom applied. Mom got hired right away. Dad, a few days later. They spent a few nights, I don't know how long, they spent sleeping in Johnny's car because they didn't have anywhere to live. Then pretty soon, I don't know how many of you remember the cannery cabins in Turlock? One became available. Oh, good. Had an outhouse, you had to go out there. I don't know how they bathed, but apparently they did. And so they moved in there, worked at the cannery. A few months later, my mom says, I feel funny, I need to go to the doctor and see what is happening with me. She went to the doctor, and the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're pregnant. And she goes, what? No way. No way. She said, I've been to a doctor when I was married the first time, and he told me, I am sorry to tell you this, but you cannot have children. She was devastated because she loves kids. And she said, she says, I don't believe this. No, that doctor that told me that I was pregnant is so wrong. I've been told I cannot have children. I have my little stepson. I'm happy with him. Well, then me started kicking her. She goes, well, I do believe there is something in there. Well, I was the first of 6, so definitely she was able to have children. Mom worked really hard. In her marriage with Dad, they owned 2 stores, and both of them would work the stores, and also when cannery season started for many years, they would also work the cannery season. And Dad ended up getting really, really sick in 1956. Terribly ill with tuberculosis, which was a really, don't tell anybody. We didn't even know what he had because Mom didn't want, you just don't talk about that because people stay away from you if they find out someone in your family is really sick. Well, he ended up really sick, and she was so stressed, bless her heart. She had, at that first time, 5 little ones, and I'm talking little ones, that she had to take care of with no income from her husband because he was in the hospital. But you know what? Her goal was to keep all of us kids together, well fed, and clothes on our back. And you know what? She did it. She did it. She worked hard and she did it. And then Dad got out of the hospital, and we're thinking, and I'm sure she did too, life is finally going to be easier for me. My husband's not sick anymore, and whatever, and he started driving truck, and still she was home with us a lot because he did a lot of out-of-town work. But at least he was there. Well, in 1961, he ended up getting sick, really sick this time, and was sent over to Livermore, which then was a very, very good veterans hospital. And ended up that they decided, well, we're going to have to do surgery this time, and here she was. Kids were older. There was one more. But she just met the challenge, went right back to making sure that her kids were well taken care of. And of course, she moved us out in the country, like I said, She didn't want us in town. She was afraid we'd be hoodlums. You know how those town kids are. Out in the country, you just got to beat up on your own brothers and sisters. And we did that. Unfortunately, we did. We were not angels. But like I said, when Mom came home, Mom? Yeah. But anyway, he had a very serious surgery then. He recovered quite well. They traveled around. Mom followed Dad at times with his truck. He worked out of town. She went with him. I took care of my baby sister. So I was married by then, so I took care of my baby. And they did well. They had a good time. They went to Lake Havasu in the winter. Crescent City for salmon fishing in the summer. What fun. They loved it. They loved it. And it was good. We missed them, but I don't think Mom missed us too much. She says we had a lot of conflict. But anyway, then Dad ended up getting sick again. Really sick this time. And he went in and had to have another lung surgery. And he didn't really, he got better, but not back to his old self, you know, and it was hard. So they decided that, well, they lived in my sister's backyard when they didn't travel. They lived in Loretta's backyard in their fifth wheel, and they decided, well, I think now it's time we need to settle down. And so they got a trailer, lived in a trailer park, until Daddy got really, really sick. And after he passed away, Mom moved again to another trailer park, a lot bigger one, trailer this time, nice. And she really, you know, I mean, she misses my dad to this day. To this day, she misses him. And we all do. We do miss our daddy. And so she loved to go to church, loved to go dancing. Oh my goodness, that woman could outdance any of you. Any of you. I am not kidding. And she played bingo. She did a lot of volunteer work for VFW. She was there for us whenever we needed her, just enjoying her life. And then she had a really bad stroke. A stroke that most people would never have pulled out of and be physically able to do things again. Most of them either died with this kind of stroke or were severely unable to do things. Not her. They put her in therapy, and if they told her, Amanda, you need to ride this bike for 10 minutes. 10 minutes? I'm going to ride it for a half hour. She did. She pushed herself so hard that she got everything back except the ability to really dance again. And that's really bothered her. She loves that dancing. And then the end of last year, she got terribly sick again. So sick that truly we believed we wouldn't be here today to celebrate her birthday. We wasn't going to be here because she wasn't here. Then we joked with her and said, hey, you pass away, guess what? We're still having your birthday party. She thought that was funny. But I tell you, there again, I mean, she had a big struggle. Cindy can attest. She came by, bless her heart, many times to check on my mom for us. But you know what? Through it all, here she is. Here she is. I have to say, I know God has blessed our family so much, but He gave us the best mother anyone can have. She loves her babies. She loves her babies from this oldie here to her little Joshua. And Hunter would be one of them too, but he stayed in Oregon. That is her first great-grandchild, born in April. So, This woman that could not have children, let me see if I can find it because I know I'll get it wrong. Well, maybe I won't. I do. What's one kid? Here or there? Okay, we all know she had 6 children, 16 grandchildren, would have been 17, but one of them passed away at birth. She has 44 great-grandchildren. She has 1 great-great-grandson, Hunter, and is expecting another great-great-grandchild in February. We are all so excited for her. She's a wonderful woman. I know you all love her. You wouldn't be here. But we love you, Mama, with all our hearts.